What's up, everyone?
Hey, it's good to see you guys. This feels so weird. Hey, we're glad that you're here. If you're checking us out, welcome to FS Students Unscripted. This is going to be a monthly podcast where we have some guests on and we talk about some of your questions and talk about some serious things, talk about some stupid things. My name is Johnny. I'm the student pastor here at Five Stones, and I will, as always, be joined by...
Yeah, my name is Caleb. I'm the student coordinator at Five Stones, so I get to work with Johnny with the middle school and high school. And today we're just going to kind of start it off simple. It's just me and Johnny today. We're going to talk about some of our background with our faith, and then we want to kind of dive into what this podcast is going to be, is kind of diving into some spiritual questions also that you guys ask. And we want to talk about things like that too, go into deeper things along those lines. But today we're just going to keep it very simple and introductory and kind of get into that to get started.
Yeah. And so this is something we've been wanting to do for a while, or I've been wanting to do for a while, because I love podcasts. If you're listening, I assume you probably do too, whether they're like 30 minutes or 3 hours. I love podcasts. Caleb, are you a fan of podcasts?
I'm to a certain degree. I've seen a few. This is my first time ever doing one. So it's an exciting experience to get to be a part of one. But yeah, there's definitely, I'm not a regular listener of podcasts by any means, but there are a few that I've dived into and have definitely enjoyed and have gotten a lot from. So
nice. Yeah, there's like some spiritual podcasts I listen to, but then I listen to a lot of podcasts about movies, and then there's like some sports ones. Like, I don't know. It's just, there's a place for everybody in the podcasting world.
Oh, absolutely.
And
so much.
We're just carving out our own little niche here. And so each month, we'll be joined by a guest. And so that'll be some servant leaders. That'll be some other staff members here at Five Stones. Yes. But it's always going to be the two of us. And we are always going to be answering some of your questions. So one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to do this was because we've received a lot of questions recently. Some really big ones, some small ones, silly ones, serious ones. And it's just hard to find time to answer all of them, especially with the time that is required to answer them. You know what I mean? And so we wanted to do this where we'll come on and we'll talk about like 4 or 5 questions, maybe 7. Like, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to kind of hit record and let it go. Then we'll be done when either we got to go to do something else or people are just done with it. But if you are interested in submitting a question, you can do so by going to the link that is in the description box of this podcast. And on that link, you will find something called a student's spiritual survey. And that's something that we've just been doing, collecting some information for a little while. And there is an opportunity for you to type in some questions. And again, we have already gotten some amazing ones, so we've got a backlog that we're going to go to. But that's really why, and we named it Unscripted because we're going to try to do like as little prep work as possible for these questions.
As you can kind of already tell.
Yeah, as you can kind of tell, we're just free flowing, man. And so we're going to just kind of answer them and talk through them. And again, whoever the guest is, we'll be talking with them about just whatever conversation might arise. And so that's kind of why we're doing this, and that's why it's named Unscripted. And so we're looking forward to digging into it. But Caleb, what are some things, we're going to do a quick get to know you for us, for you guys, if you've had the opportunity, hopefully you've had the opportunity to meet us, but maybe not have too many conversations. And so what are some things that people need to know about you, Caleb Peters?
Yeah. Well, for me specifically, to those of you I have met, it has been an absolute joy getting to know you guys since October starting here. It's been just such a blessing from God to get to walk with you guys in your faith and see how you're all growing. And just even with this podcast and looking at some of the questions that have been submitted on this spiritual survey we were pulling from, my heart and position is just so eager to talk to y'all about these questions, because I look at these and I just see questions that even I still have and explore, and also at the same time questions that I did have and now I have a little bit more clarity on. And I think that's important. What's important to remember too is, you know, we have a podcast like this and we talk about maybe some answers to some questions you all have, but it's always important to remember that those questions while some get answered, you have questions all throughout your Christian walk. And that never goes away. Johnny would agree with me that we are growing and learning just as much as you all are.
Absolutely.
And it never ends. It never ends until the Lord comes and takes us home. But for me personally, just to kind of go into a little bit of my personal journey, this is the first really ever job I've had in ministry. And I've grown up Christian my entire life. And this is the second major church that I've been a part of. I first went to Central Church of God over closer to Charlotte.
Shout out.
Yes, shout out to Central Church. Love it over there. But just along with that, I've, been blessed with a very connected family that, raised me Christian and has only grown stronger as I've gotten older. And because of the blessings that have come from that, God has revealed to me the things that have been revealed to me and the kind of blessings that I've been given because of the faithfulness of my parents and my family and all of that. So that has been an amazing journey as well. But I just remember always growing up and, when I was young, middle school, high school, I had the background as a Christian and had all of that. But as I got older into my later teen years, I started to ask the why questions and the how questions of the faith. I had all this background, and then I started to ask, well, I'm starting to hear about all these other religions. What if what I was raised on isn't the actual truth? So I started to pursue what I would call, and what I've heard a lot of other Christians call, my head knowledge for Christ.
Could I interrupt and ask a question there?
Yeah.
What was it that, was there a friend in your life, somebody that you went to school with that was a different religion, or was there a teacher or a class? Because you've shared that with me before, just an interest in other religions, and I think that's something that we all reach a point where we kind of are influenced by others. We break out of our bubble. If you grow up in the church, you're always around Christians, and your parents are probably friends with Christians, and things like that. Yeah, get that out of the way. We will be videoing these eventually, but we're starting small. But yeah, what was it? Was there a person, or did you just see it on a TV show? What was it that kind of opened that door for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was a bunch of little things. So just in history class, learning about different religions.
Oh yeah.
Kind of the intricacies of all of that, about each different religion, especially as I got into college, to learning more about. Not only just different religions and beliefs, but what, when they came about, what age they came about throughout history, learning that Christianity isn't the oldest religion. And then your mind goes to well, wouldn't you think the oldest would be the most accurate? Simple thoughts like that. And then, just growing up, being a teenager, you start to question things, right? Whether you're someone who likes to follow the rules, or you're one that is more apt to question authority. As teenagers, we ask questions. This is what we do. We question the status quo. We question the things that we've been taught, and that's not necessarily always a bad thing. There's a healthy aspect of that. And in that, I started reading multiple books to kind of dive into that, and finished a few, but a couple were Jesus Among Other Gods by Ravi Zacharias, and then I also really liked Frank Turek, and that's how I really got into apologetics. And into defending your faith.
I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
Yes. Which I never finished, but I did read a good section of that. So after that, I feel like I read, I did some podcasts, I read a few books, and I felt like I had a deep-rooted head knowledge. I was like, yep, Christ is the one true way. I definitely can confirm that the evidence supports this. Another big one was Ray Comfort on YouTube, his interviews with people. There was there's a video that he did called Evolution versus God, that talks about, the different views on how all that works, and creationism and all that stuff. So that was another big avenue that I looked at. But then the head knowledge was there, and then, that grew my convictions throughout high school. I started to have some friends that would, think differently than me, and started to, ask me questions about my faith. And throughout high school, I loved to talk to people about the apologetic side of it, the reason for my faith. And I was very God fortunately gave me the confidence that I needed at that time to kind of talk about that stuff. But I was missing a crucial part that I still didn't realize, which was the word and prayer. It's not like I didn't know what the Bible was or the word, but I wasn't reading the Bible throughout the week. I was praying, but it was like at lunch, at dinner, before bed, like the common major times that you would pray.
Yeah.
And I just remember it so starkly, sitting upstairs, and I was just, hanging upstairs, and I just felt that I wanted more from my relationship with Christ. And that's all of a sudden I was like, you know what, I'm going to get into the word more. I want to start this, let's go to, I actually talked to my dad about it. I was like, how should I approach reading the word?
Oh, wow.
And he was like, just go beginning to end, cover to cover. I'm like, cool, let's do it. Let's do it. It's going to take, I'm like, this is a big journey, but let's just start it, So I did. I started doing that. I started with the Bible app first, and then went into the actual Bible that I had. But then just started intentionally praying, like nightly, and then it turned into praying more throughout the day. It's very, very cool how once you take that first step, how it just becomes more and more involved in your life, in your entire life. It becomes a lifestyle, to be quite honest. And then that was where what I then call, or what, like I said, other Christians that would call the heart knowledge for God. You start to build your faith. You know the evidence for why he exists, and you search the how and the why, and then you have you start to grow the heart knowledge for that too. But long story short, that's kind of the things that, not completed, obviously, because there's a lot more to go, and the Christian walk, it goes on for your entire life, but was the major catalyst for me getting into my Christian faith. And one last big thing I'll say is, growing up, you always would hear these testimonies that people have about this big miraculous change they had for Christ, going through these hardships. And I asked myself, I'm like, really, what's my story? Like, I don't have anything. I was like, my parents raised me Christian. It's not like of course we had struggles and things that we went through, but there was nothing. I was like, what's my big story? I was like, where do I fit in here? I don't have this big like aha moment where God turned my life around. And what I realized is, I did have a testimony. It just wasn't one big, like, encapsulating one moment. It wasn't just this one big moment of change. It was a bunch of little moments throughout my life that God worked in my life. And that was what made me realize that, there's testimonies of all kinds, and he works through different people in all kinds of different ways. So.
And that's way more common than the alternative. Like, people have that, like, everybody's talking about the person that was like just living completely wild, and then they get struck by lightning, kind of thing. Yeah. And it happens, and it's like so cool. But for so many of us, it's just like, there's that a book, A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. It's just like you're kind of just moving in the same direction for a long, long time, and then you see progress, and you see hardships, and you see all that sort of stuff. But it takes place over a span, not just like one night. Man, I just like, absolutely. My life flashed before my eyes kind of thing. It's like, and if that's somebody's story, then that's amazing. But I think those are the stories that get all the press. And it's like, for so many people, it's just the normal everyday life kind of thing. Yeah. That's so cool. And we'll dig more into our stories and everything, but for me, I grew up in the church. My dad's a pastor, still works at the same church he was at when from as long as I can remember. So I've been in church like all the time. Like I look at other like pastors' kids or church staff kids, and they look exhausted on a Sunday morning. I'm like, you were here yesterday. Yep. You'll be here this afternoon. You've been here during the week. Like, yep, this is our second home right here. Like Amanda, she'll be a guest at some point. Like her daughter comes into the office sometimes, and I'm like, yep, that's me. I remember just running to the break room. The secretary's giving me good candy. Everything. My dad's like, where'd you get that? That type of stuff. And so I've been in church like my whole life. I came to know Christ when I was in 4th grade, like just got hit with a ton of bricks. I had so much fear and anxiety as a little kid because I was afraid of like not spending eternity with Christ. And I used to be just wrapped and terrified with with fear. And I came to the realization, this is a really condensed version, but I came to a realization that I was so afraid because I didn't know him. And I didn't know the peace that he offered. I didn't actually have a relationship with him. And so I began asking a lot of questions, and I prayed with my parents one evening, prayed to receive Christ. And God's just been confirming things ever since. It has not been up and to the right, like a graph or something, like just right. Boom, all good, not by any means. There's been so many hardships, and man, it takes such a long time to learn some things. And I want to say that right here at the start is that while each month we're going to answer a bunch of your questions, like, number one, it took us a long time to reach the stage of life where maybe we could even answer some of the questions.
Absolutely.
To what you were saying earlier, Caleb.
Right.
And on top of that, like, this isn't something, like, I think about it like if you're sick, like if you have a some disease or something, and the doctor's like, here, take this medicine and you'll be better in like 10 days. Like, anything we talk about here, like, there are good practices for life, and Jesus can completely transform. Yes, absolutely. But kind of back to your point about your testimony is like, sometimes it's like, it's not like, take this and you'll be better. It's like, take this and continue walking, and then in like 3 years you'll look back and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe where I used to be, kind of stuff.
Yes.
There's very few quick fixes for a lot of the things we're going to talk about, and I don't want that to discourage you guys, because while we might be older and some of our guests are older and everything, like, it's a long obedience in the same direction. Like, that's the best term or best phrase I've ever heard following Jesus. And that's definitely how my life has been. The ironic thing is that Caleb and I were both at the same church around the same time, even though we didn't know each other.
Right,
he was at Central. So before I came to Five Stones, I graduated from college and immediately started working as a middle school pastor at Central Church near Uptown Charlotte. And we were there like right at the same time. Had no idea.
Yeah. We had all these connections. Like, the first time we talked, we had like
crazy
friends of friends we knew, same church. It was kind of wild.
It's so nuts. Yeah. That took up like half that interview.
Yeah,
it was so crazy.
Yeah.
But and then God brought me here to Five Stones 5 years ago, and so it's been so cool to see. And I mean, again, we'll have time to get into more things as we go, but like, just the way God has changed me in 5 years, like, I don't feel like I'm the same person at all that I used to be. And so kind of with that, who would you say, Caleb, has been the biggest spiritual influence in your life? This is a surprise question.
Yeah.
Unscripted.
Unscripted.
Get it? It's the name of the podcast.
For me, it would definitely have to be my dad. There is no other person that I look up to more than him. And we are different in a lot of ways, personality wise. We have a lot of major differences. I connect more with my mom, and I talk to her a lot. But just my dad as a father figure, as a husband and a father, he is just the ultimate spiritual guide that I look to for everything.
That's awesome. And
that has been prevalent throughout my entire life. And of course, as a kid, you see your father and your mother, or whatever situation you're going through. Mine are just, they're very, very close, and they their love for Christ is reflected in our family. And I am only just now beginning to scratch the surface with how blessed I've been because of that, and because of how they've continued to follow Christ, that I'm receiving the blessings of that. And so are my siblings as well. And that has within itself been a blessing, that God's just opened my eyes to see what I've been blessed with. But yeah, it would for sure have to be my dad. Both That's my parents cool. for sure, but singularly, if I had to choose one, it'd be my father.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I would say for me, I think definitely my parents. To start, especially, it's weird. Like, as you continue to grow and get older and everything, like how much you think back to things like that, but then how many other voices have spoken into you. Like, right. I think immediately of my parents, because I'm so grateful to them that while I was a pastor's kid, while I was a staff kid, and I was there literally all the time. I mean, y'all don't even know. Like, church is so like, it's just so easy nowadays sometimes, because I'm like, bro, back in the day, mandatory, like at a minimum, this is how often we were at the church. Sunday morning, 3 services, 8, 9:30, and 11. Sunday afternoon, we had something called visitation, where every time there was a first-time guest, we would show up to their house. I want to make sure everybody heard that there. Like, we would show up at their house, and then we would just be like, thanks for coming to church. And sometimes it'd be like 4 people. Sometimes there was like 10 just showing up. Then we go to Sunday night church for youth choir. Then we would start the week. Monday night, there would be visitation for the entire church. So I'd go with my parents, because that's when we go visit the adults. Sunday afternoon was when we would visit students. Wednesday night was youth group for middle school and high school. They had the space to be able to do both and everything. Then Saturday night, my dad had to set up coffee for the whole church. Or not for the whole church, but for like life groups that would, like small groups that would meet. And we had to set up like seven carafes, gigantic, 50-gallon carafes on Saturday afternoons. And so, like, that was a minimum. And there was normally many other things going on. But in all of that, like, I never felt like it was a burden. Like, I never felt like, I mean, certainly there were times I didn't want to go to visitation and I didn't want to go set up coffee. That was probably the worst thing to do. I hated doing that. And, but, like, my family would always do it together. And we were always, like, it was a privilege that we got to do it. And I didn't have grandparents or aunts and uncles that lived real close. The closest one was like 3 hours away. Mm-hmm. And so 2-3 hours away. And so, like, there were people in the church that literally became our family. Like, there was a guy that we still see at least once a year, if not more. They've moved away, that I call him my uncle, even though he's not. Like, and so it's like that. I'm so thankful to them for kind of instilling that communal, like, centrality. And then I think, man, I'm so blessed. Like, I have an embarrassment of riches of people that have poured into my life. Like my youth pastors, Steve Strickland and Anthony Kendall. I hope to have Steve on here one day. I probably will. I think of some of my friends that have really cared for me. I think of the people here at Five Stones that have really loved me so well. Pastor McCants, Kevin Rains, so many of our elders. Have just Pastor Nick, I should say now. Pastor Bailey. Pastor Bailey. Like that, I think of so many people. And then, like you're talking about listening to podcasts and reading, I could go on for so long with people that I love to listen to and learn from and everything. But, those would be some of my biggest ones. Okay.
Hold on, I want to go back to. I have a question for you, because I know. Okay. Well, you kind of answered it to some degree. Okay. But you were obviously involved in ministry all throughout. Now you're a student pastor. Yeah. So, because I've talked to people where being a pastor's kid, they were in ministry, and then it created like an aversion to it. Like they were like, I can't. I want to be away from this. Not in a sense that they wanted to step away from their faith, but like I do not want to work in ministry.
that happens sometimes too.
Right. Yeah. I was just curious if you ever had feelings like that. Like you said, you enjoyed it a lot because your family was together, but if there was ever a time you're like, you know what, maybe I want to step away from ministry for something, for a job, or if it was always just like, you know what, this is what I know what I'm doing, like
that's
what God's called me to do.
That's a great question. From early on, like, I felt a call to ministry. Like, I kid you not, I felt it at 6th grade. So I was at camp in 6th grade, and I wrote it. I remember it so clearly. I wrote it in my journal. I could probably find it somewhere. And I wrote a sermon. And I remember I walked up to one of the guys I mentioned, Steve. He was the middle school pastor. He's still the middle school pastor there at First Baptist Indian Trail. And I was like, I think God's calling me into ministry. And he looked at me and was like, I think so. And then when I was in 8th grade, it was confirmed that, like, I wanted to be into student ministry, specifically. Like, I wanted to work with students. And then there was just, like, so many random things. I remember one time at Metrolina. Shout out to MCA alumni. I was like, this chapel speaker asked people to read scripture during the service, just like randomly. He was like, somebody open to Isaiah and like raise your hand and read it. And me and some of my friends, I think I was a senior at this point, and so we were sitting on the front row that we had assigned sections, and literally I stood up and read the scripture, and like I was the third or fourth to do it, and the guy looked at me and goes from the stage and was like, have you ever considered going into ministry? And like the entire room laughed because all my classmates knew and everything. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I have. And he was like, and he looked at me and goes, he's like, I think that's what God has for your life. Like one of the weirdest, I mean, I say weird, but like it's a wild situation. And so it's been things like that. There's certainly been moments of discouragement, like where I've questioned things, or I've like, you know, there was a season of discouragement, honestly, when I was at Central. I loved the students. I loved so many of the people that I worked with, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But like, I felt as though God was stirring something in me. Wound up being here at Five Stones, obviously. But there was a time where I was like, I don't really know what you're doing in me. Like, are you calling me somewhere else? Like, are you wanting me to do something different? Like, I don't know. I'm open to that if that's what you want me to do, but I don't feel like freedom to do that. So, you know, and I think a lot of it honestly goes back to the way my parents treated church. Because like you mentioned, people can turn away or have an aversion to church and everything. And I think so often it can be like when church is treated like a chore, when it's treated like a responsibility, but not in a good responsibility.
Right.
Like, so
something to check off the list.
Yeah.
Done throughout the week.
Yeah. It's just, to-do list. That's a really good way to put it. And so when having it never be that way, like I don't think of church that way. And it's hard for me to put myself in the mindset. I know people do, and I try to empathize with them, but it's really hard for me to understand because that's just, I've never experienced that. Like it's never been that way.
Right. Yeah.
So, I don't know if that fully answers what you were.
No, it does. Okay. I was just curious because I've heard two sides of it. You know, I've heard people that were involved in ministry and they're like, you know, this is so cool. I want to do this, and then like. Really what kind of brought that question to mind is even just when I was at Samaritan's Purse, you know, working there, I talked to this guy and his dad was a pastor, and he's like, oh, you know, Jesus would have to strike me with lightning to become a pastor. He saw how hard it could be. Just kind of, you know, felt like, you know, and that's fine if you don't feel called that way. For sure. I was just curious, you know, there's so many different stories to how different people feel towards that.
And not for nothing, like First Baptist is a great church. Like it treated my dad and my family like so well. Preacher Mike, he's been there for over 40 years, almost 50 years, I think. Like, I know my dad had a lot of struggles. I know he faced a lot of, you know, difficulties and everything, but the staff and particularly the pastors, like they cared for my family. And I think that's something, honestly, that really drew me to Five Stones too, is that the elders here, just really, really care for the families and care for the staff. And so, So if you could have dinner with any Bible character, who would it be?
Dinner with any Bible character?
Any of them.
Anyone. Man. Probably Paul.
Yeah.
I'd say. This is another cool part of my journey, but I just finished reading through the entire Bible cover to cover. Which is awesome. And just, I was just kind of sitting in it and just thinking about how, you know, the grace that God's poured on me and just the strength he's given me to even do that. I would not think I'd be where I'm at today with that. But yeah, I just think in his letters, the things he mentions, there was a specific thought that came to mind when I was reading through his letters, especially in Acts and all of that, is just the absolute disregard for his own safety that he had.
Dude,
and just how absolutely. And just how we look at that in our own lives, where we're like, we'll often ask ourselves the question, like, why can't we be like that? Why can't we do that in our, like, we're in a place in our country where we can share our faith relatively everywhere and not be punished for it. And that here's a situation where, he's getting, lashed, put in prison, and ultimately was killed for his faith. And, to some extent, I think, there is room for growth for us here for that. But to a different extent, I was like, what if there's just some people that are gifted with that amount of courage in the Holy Spirit to do what he needed to do. Like his job in the Gospels was to get the word to the Gentiles. And God had to, the only way that could happen is if the Holy Spirit did a miraculous work in a man, to stomp out the fear and the doubt and all of that it would take for the gospel and the good news to get to so many people that it needed to. So not to say that gift can't be worked on or it can't be earned, or not earned, I should say, not gifted from God to other people, but it was like the intensity with which Paul was in the, talking and spreading the gospel. It's like that gift was specific. That gift to that power level was specific for that time, to spread the gospel. And that's not to say it can't happen again, but it was an interesting thought I had. But I would just love to ask him so many questions about, the thoughts that went through his head, what he was going through, and maybe even some of the, like, because the Gospels also, or after the Gospels, I should say, in Acts and all of that, they talk about the doubts he had and all of that in his letters, and how he didn't feel even worthy to spread the gospel. So
I'm chief of sinners.
Yes,
dude.
Yep.
That's a good answer. I'm gonna cheat. I want to have like a round table. Like I want to be with like 6 or 7 people. I'm gonna try to narrow it down though. The first person that kind of pretty normally comes to mind, and I'm not gonna say Jesus, because I talk to him every morning and night. I'm kidding.
Talk to him enough.
That's such a bad pastor joke. So stupid. But an idea that a person that always comes to mind is Enoch in Genesis, where if you are familiar, it's like Genesis 5, where gets all of a sudden everybody's favorite moment in the Bible, and it goes to a genealogy where it's like so-and-so had 17 kids and he died at 500 years old or whatever.
Yes.
And everything. And we get to Enoch, and it says that Enoch lived for like 350 years, and and this is literally the verse, Enoch walked with the Lord, and then he was not. And like, I just want to ask him, be like, so what's up with that? Like, what do you mean you were not? What happened? Like, did you just fly away? It says Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him. I'm like, bro, just like hit the elevator and like just went up. Didn't
experience death, I guess.
Yeah, like Elijah riding the chariots of fire or whatever. Yeah. So he would be one. Next, I would want to have like Samson, because I just want to be like, bro, like, are you... like, how whacked up are you? Like what? Like, can you have a conversation with somebody, or are you so jacked up all the time that you're just like insane? Because he's listed in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews, but like all he does the entirety of his life is make horrible choices, horrible choices. So I just want to be like, what's your deal, man?
Why'd you keep dropping the ball?
Yeah, and then another one would be I'm picking like all the weirdos. I want to talk to Balaam and be like, he was riding a donkey in Numbers, and then all of a sudden the donkey starts talking to him.
Yes.
Go read that story if you want to. It's somewhere in Numbers. I can't remember where. It's been
forever since I've been there.
But I'm like, was it like Shrek, where he like turned around and started talking to him? Was it like a knowledge? Was he like telepathic? Like, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just got to know some of those questions. I want to talk to Philip in the New Testament, because in Acts chapter 8, he like teleports, for it seems like he was in one city, he baptized, or he was traveling on a road, baptized an Ethiopian, and then all of a sudden it says that he was in this other city that's like hundreds of miles away. I'm like, gotta know what that's about.
Yeah,
like that's amazing. And then if we were to take it seriously, I think like for sure I would want to probably the one I'd want to sit down with most is Peter. For all the same reasons you kind of talked about Paul, like his doubts, his failures, all that sort of stuff. Like to go from the disciple that literally could do nothing right to being the leader of the early church who still made a ton of mistakes. Like Peter is the perfect image of like a leader who just can't quite get it together, but God continues to use him. And so I resonate a lot with Peter, just trying his hardest and just trying, man. He's just trying.
Yeah.
So yeah. Before we get into some serious questions, I do have some other random ones that are a little less serious.
Okay.
All right. For our gamers at home, what's your main in Marvel Rivals? What's your favorite? Choose your hero or villain. I'm not judging.
Yeah.
Like, which one are you going with?
Yeah. Right now, it's Luna Snow.
Oh.
I mean, 9 times out of 10, I'm playing a healer because everybody wants to play damage. So when I first started, it was Adam Warlock. I loved Adam Warlock, and I haven't played him in a while. He's, I'm playing competitive, so you have to. It's nice to have a healer that has some sort of healing ultimate, where you can heal your entire team. But yeah, if I'm playing, I guess for each class, it would be like healer, Luna Snow. If it's tank, I'm usually going Magneto. If it's damage, lately I've been playing Punisher just because I don't play much damage and he's easy to pick up. But another damage one was like Hela. Hela was a good one too.
Nice.
But yeah, those are my main ones. Then you just got to pray for a team that can be competent, because otherwise you get demoted a million times and then you're back to square one.
People are either more locked in than they've been its entire 45 minutes, or they are just like, I'm done with this show. I'm done talking about this.
I'm done.
I've told you my main is Cloak and Dagger. I love the being able to switch between more of a damage focus and more of a healing. I typically just do healing, but it's so much fun. I love their ult too, or their ultimate. But if it's not that, I've tried Hela. I don't think I'm very good at her. I've tried Venom. I don't know. I'm just tanking through everybody.
Yeah.
But I've played Bucky a couple of times, and he's a lot of fun. I can't figure out his ultimate, though. I'm not good at it. Okay, that was one question. What's the best movie you've seen recently? And it can be a rewatch.
Oh, recently?
Yeah.
I mean, we've already talked about it. It was a surprise movie, too, but Wild Robot. I just watched it honestly with my family.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 movie. If you're judging us right now, just rent it and tell me you're not going to be crying by the end. If you get through that movie without crying, you don't have a soul. I'm convinced.
We're at an age we could still watch it, okay?
It's 1000%.
It's cool, whatever age you are, okay?
Bro, animation is in now. I remember in high school, when people thought anime was just for children because they were watching Avatar and stuff, and now it's now it's you can be however old you want to be and be watching any sort of animated thing.
Yeah,
bro, I'd still get down with SpongeBob. Love that show, man. Is this your wallet?
Yeah, is this your wallet?
Okay, sorry. Wild Robot.
Wild Robot. Yeah. Well, I was saying the reason for that is just because if you're following TV movies, you have your good ones here and there, but just everything is the same story. It's a remake of something else, and I know Wild Robot was from a book, but I've never seen it. And at the end of it, I was like, it's like WALL-E and Big Hero 6, Baymax. That's what it kind of reminds me of, a mix of.
Yeah.
But just I haven't really seen an art style like that. It looked similar to me to the newest Puss in Boots movie, kind of like that.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, well, it had a different art style than the first movie did, which I haven't even seen that movie all the way through. But I was just watching it, and I'm like, I turned to my family, I'm like, this looks like moving concept art, and it just was such a cool. The cinematography was just great. I just loved the pullback shots and the lighting of them running through the woods and all of that stuff. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's really
for
cool.
sure. Go check it out.
But yeah, it's just a really it's really down to earth story and very heartfelt as well. Mm-hmm. So it was just a good
funny
movie. Yeah,
it's like funny. Legit funny.
Yeah.
Chloe and I just rewatched for some reason. I can't even remember why. We just rewatched the Night at the Museum trilogy.
Oh yes,
bro, those are so funny.
They're so
like
good.
The third one is definitely like it goes down. You know, from the first one being like instant classic to like kind of lower in each rung, but they're still so funny. And like, what a great idea. I mean, they could have made probably like 10 of them going to different museums and like all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It could have been so much more, or a TV show or something. And shout out to Robin Williams, like just the best. Owen Wilson, Ben Stiller, just being insane.
Amazing cast in those movies.
Unbelievable. They just keep going, and then Rami Malek shows up, and you're like, this guy won an Oscar, and like he's just like this dude that shows up for 5 minutes. Oh man, it was so good. But other than that, like, I guess if we went away from a kids movies, I like really love the new Dune movies.
Oh yes,
I know they're like
those were also surprise
weird
hits.
I know they're like really weird, and they've got like some creepy, like crazy type stuff. But oh my gosh, those movies are so good. I just got a new sound bar for my TV, and I immediately turned on Dune, and it's like it's just like exploding in your ears. Those movies are just like right in my sweet spot, like just my jam. Absolutely love it. Okay, let's get into a couple of questions, and then we're gonna call it a first episode. You feeling good? You feeling good about the first episode?
Yeah. This has been great. Yeah.
Hope you guys are enjoying our rambling.
Yeah.
I think the first question is the most pressing, and now we're gonna need to get into some of the questions that you guys have asked us. Caleb's prepared a couple that he kind of sifted through and found at least one. But I wanted to get to the most pressing one. It was the very first, one of the very first questions we had submitted. And I think it's the most important question we've received. And it was, did Jesus have rizz? What are your thoughts on that slightly heretical question?
Yeah, I don't know. That's we saw this and we're like, man, we gotta get this.
We gotta
one down.
address this.
How do we address this one?
I need to open the commentaries. We had a long discussion with Pastor McCants, discussing all the possibilities. No, we didn't.
Yeah, no. Well, I don't know. It's like, how do you unpack this? Like, what kind of rizz are you talking about? Because in terms of, I don't know, if you're talking about trying to attract the opposite gender, that wasn't his goal. But in terms of spiritual rizz, think about how many people he brought how many disciples he had, how many people he brought to the Christian faith. I mean, this thing's still going on. I mean, he has like generational rizz, if you think about it. That has echoed throughout history. So,
Bro, you just Jesus juked this question so hard.
Yeah, I mean, like, what am I?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we're a little late to the game, but that should have been a Valentine's Day question. Be like, how high is your spiritual rizz? Like,
right.
Like, I know you got rizz, boy, but how high is your spiritual rizz? Is it generational, or is it just, or are you just checking the boxes?
Right.
Yeah. Make them be honest with you. I have no idea how to answer this question. I mean, and in regards to like, there was obviously something magnetic about him.
Yes.
Like, now did he have rizz? I mean, I've talked about this before in FS Middle especially. Like, there are people in the Bible that scripture literally is like, yo, this person was gorgeous.
Yes.
Like, they say that about Esther. They say that about David. They say that about Samson, I think, and Delilah, and Bathsheba, and people like that. Like, I think Daniel, too. Daniel, yes. And it's like, these people were attractive. You know what it says about Jesus? Literally in Isaiah, it's like, he's not going to be anything to look at. Like, he is not going to be drawing people in by like physical, like, there's going to be nothing impressive about him physically. He's not going to be. So, like, when I think about this, it's like, he was the greatest preacher that ever lived. Like, his sermons are greater than any other. I don't think based off of that, I don't think he was the most talented, like, orator. Like, it doesn't seem like that's the case. I don't think he certainly wasn't the most attractive. I don't think we know for a fact that he was, single for his entire life. Like, he was single and celibate, so never, people may have been attracted to him. I'm sure somebody was, like, but he wasn't, people weren't fawning over him like he's like Harry Styles or something. Yeah. Like, and you see these paintings of Jesus and it's just this like luscious hair and this blue eyes, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like that's a good looking man. It's like, nah, that wasn't him, bro. Like he's that guy that you look at and you're like, oh, okay, and you look away.
Yeah.
But to your point, like there was a magnetism to him, and I think it came from his love. I think it came from his authenticity. I think it came from his power. Like, while he might probably not have been the most gifted, like, talent-wise, he certainly was, let me make it clear, he was the most gifted person to ever exist. He was God in human flesh.
Yes.
But, like, it doesn't appear as though he was the most talented person or attractive person. And so in that way, I am confident that is not what the person that submitted this... These are all anonymous, by the way. I'm confident that's not what they were asking for, but this was way more than you asked for anyway. So if you're in this deep, you're locked into the Unscripted podcast. Like, you're here. Hit subscribe. Hit like. If this gets 10,000 likes, I don't know. We'll do something.
If the answers spark more questions, ask more. We'll dive into it more.
There we go, man. There we go. All right, so that was my important question for today. Go ahead, I think you got a couple.
Yeah. I do have just one more we can go over just to kind of
let's do it.
Keep it broad today. But like we said, there's a bunch here, and let me just say, like, the fact that you guys are asking these, again, they're anonymous, but it's just amazing that you guys have this curiosity for your faith and just the things that you want to know, just whether it's, how to discern thoughts between, God's thoughts and your own. I'm just kind of going into some examples here of what we've seen, God's plan for your life, how to be a good person. It's just simple, like, like seemingly simple things all the way down to like the nitty gritty apologetics, deep theological stuff.
And we want them, and to be clear, we want them all.
Yes.
Like, we want absolutely. The silly, we want the serious, we want the deep ones. Like, again, these are anonymous, so feel free to send in whatever. Yeah. Anyways, absolutely. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no problem. So this one is really, we're, as we talk to you students, one that can really apply to everybody as you guys are getting older and going through your middle school, high school journey, is just, it just asks this. It says, how do you live a life of a child of God while being a teenager with a lot of different influences? Would you want to go at this one first, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Live a life as a child of God while having a lot of different influences.
Yeah, specifically it says here while being a teenager. So just within teenage life, how to continue living a life as a child.
Yeah. I mean, again, like all of these answers are going to be, more responses than answers necessarily.
Absolutely.
They're not going to be a complete by any means. I think one of the biggest ones is you really need to watch your influences. Like, I think who you have around you is so incredibly important. The things you allow into, like, I know it's the cliche, like garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. My dad used to talk about like there are two dogs in your mind, of the flesh and of the spirit, and whichever one you feed is the one that's going to win. And so when we talk about like living for Christ as teenagers, like I think one of the things that is really hard, especially for this generation where y'all have so many influences that can be speaking into your life, that can be influencing you, all that sort of stuff, is to really just be thoughtful about what influences you. Yeah. Like, know yourself. Like, I think that's such an underrated part of the spiritual Christian walk, is knowing yourself, because some of the things that would be really detrimental, and I'm not talking about like big sinful things, like if there's somebody in your life that's like, hey, let's go get drunk tonight, or let's go, whatever, like, obviously that's a like no, but there's things like if you struggle with anger, you know, being around people that are really angry is not going to be beneficial for you.
Yeah.
If you struggle a lot with, you know, a big thing is like comparison, being on social media for hours upon hours a day is not going to be helpful for you. And the reason that I talk about it in such specific things is it's not going to be the same for everybody. Like for some people, like social media, I mean, I don't think it's great for anybody, but it's not as much of a problem because like I'm just on there watching stupid reels. Like I just want to see I just want to see somebody like pull a prank on somebody or depending on what your algorithm is or like how somebody's going to cook this food. I keep getting food in my like YouTube shorts and it's like how people are cooking food. And it's like, I love this. This is amazing. So I think, you know, like if you really struggle with like cussing, I've said this before, like you should remove all explicit music from your phone, from your Apple Music, from your Spotify. Like you should remove that because that's not going to help you. Like it's not going to, but that might not be the same case for, you know, everybody. I'm not advocating that you should just go listen to whatever you want to listen to, but I think knowing what influences you, knowing some of your, I guess, triggers, for lack of a better word, your weaknesses, can be really important. But I'd love to hear your thoughts while I'm going to think a little bit while you're share whatever you think.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to dive into just how much influencer is, and John, you kind of already talked about it, but you know, it's not like we just have the people around us. We have social media, you know, whether you want to count YouTube as that or not, YouTube, the internet, we have literally, you know, millions upon millions of things flowing into our minds every day that can either lead us towards God or lead us away from God. And we just really do have to be careful about what we're looking at. Just like Johnny was saying, if you have to really know yourself and, you know, just being, you know, I'm not that far from being a teenager, you know, you have tons of influences coming in. You're trying to figure out at the same time who you are and who you want to be. And the earlier you can figure that out, the better. That's not to say that there, you know, any discredit to people that find Christ later or mature a little bit later. That's not to discredit that, but the sooner you can say, you know what, I'm going to live my life for Christ and I'm going to start working towards that is an amazing decision to come to and to know. When you get to that point where you start to take your faith on your own and it's not your parents anymore, that's when it really gets into the nitty-gritty and into the intentional aspect of it.
Right.
And just trying to tackle it on, you know, you're looking at, you know, the big things you can do, the little things you can do, looking at, you know, all of the down this huge timeline of like your entire life, when you really, what you just need to focus on is taking it one day at a time and making intentional decisions to follow Christ every opportunity you have. It's just about the day-to-day, and just that those small day-to-day actions then become your pattern, and your that just becomes a repetition throughout your life. You don't, you know, of course it's great to have a plan and what you're going to do with this and how you're going to handle this situation, but if you start getting into that overthinking and you know, down too much into that, it's going to become overwhelming quickly. So just try to keep your mind in the here and now, and how you can just do simple actions that reflect Christ. You know, I tell people all the time, and I've seen examples of it, it's just like Johnny's talked about, cussing, anger, all of those things. If you start with something as simple as trying to limit what you say with your words, your attitude around others, you would be surprised to see the conviction that pops up in other people. You may not see it right away. You might see little things like friends that you have that cuss a lot or are very loose with their language, and all of a sudden they don't cuss as much. Or they may even say, "Hey, I'm sorry I said that. Like, I'm sorry I said this cuss word or whatever." We've had it happen. I literally was I was out playing pickleball with some friends, and this guy was just being very loose with his language, and it was me, my brother, and another friend from here at Five Stones, and we weren't, you know, that's just not how we talk. And he turned to us, he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry for my language." And we got back, we went to leave, and I just turned to my brother and I was like, you see how just a simple act of living like Christ can affect others. And really that just goes along the lines too of evangelizing to others. It's great to
Yeah.
share the gospel, and that's absolutely what we should be doing. But also, don't discount the small moments, the little things that you can do to share God that prompt people to inquire of Jesus and ask you questions like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly watch what's pouring into your mind, what you're taking in, but also if you're trying to follow Christ to the best of your ability, especially in your young years. The word I would really go back to is how intentional you are. Just be intentional with it. Get in the word a little bit every day at least. Get in prayer, and because we won't know how we're supposed to act or God's truth unless we're in the word. It's always, no matter what age you are, you should be into the word to some degree if you're being intentional about following Christ. So just be intentional. That's the big thing I'd say.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that's so important that I think I see a lot of students trip up at. Like they say, I want to stop doing this sin. I want to stop, being with this crowd or whatever. And so they're like, what, I'm just going to stop it.
Yeah.
But everything in our lives, like when we stop doing something, it creates a vacuum that has to be filled. And so what you're talking about with this intentionality is like filling that space with something else. Like where there are negative influences, fill them with positive ones. That could be if you really are, struggling with your self-image and comparison with social media. All right, well then you need to get off social media, but you need to fill that time with being with positive influences in your life, being with your friends, being in scripture, certainly being in prayer, all that sort of stuff. It's so important when we're, if the music that we're listening to or the shows that we're watching, like the stuff that we're taking in, the games we're playing, whatever it might be, are really pulling us away, well then we need to stop it and we need to replace it with something else. And it might be something similar, like, really explicit music being replaced with either not explicit music or Christian music, listening to worship music or whatever it might be. There has to be something filled there. And so finding what that is for you, getting outside, taking a walk, going to get coffee with a friend, sitting down, playing a game with your parents or your family or whoever, there are things that we can do. It's hard, like you're talking about, it's hard to kind of break that and then start something else intentionally.
Yes.
So one of my favorite quotes is start where you are, not where you think you should be. Wherever you are right now, just start there. Don't expect to be Paul or something tomorrow. But just start where you are and make some slight adjustments, make some slight changes. And then as that continues to happen, just continue to make more and then make more and then make more. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I'd never even noticed this. And then make that adjustment. And it's that slow. And I think that's how we started this whole conversation, talking about these questions of it is a slow progression more often than not.
Yeah.
Of this intentionality I love how you brought in conviction, this conviction that kind of grows, and not in a scary way, but in so as I draw closer to the Lord, the things of this earth will grow strangely dim, as that song says.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what we want for you guys. That's what we want for ourselves. That's what we desire. And so, I don't know. Did you have any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah. To Johnny's point, just to, there are things that I'm sure both of us are convicted of now that when we were in middle school, high school, we wouldn't have given a second thought.
Yeah.
And they just kind of come out of nowhere. It's just what, maybe I shouldn't be listening, like Johnny was saying, maybe I shouldn't be listening to that music. Maybe I shouldn't be watching this movie. Maybe I shouldn't be playing this game. And that's another thing too we could go into is, personal conviction and all of that with everybody, because those can be different too. But God does the cleansing. We don't have to worry about that. All we need to worry about is responding to it, and continuing to. And the more that we either, to put it simply, we either feed our soul or we feed our flesh, and whichever one we feed more is going to continue to grow and prosper more.
Yep.
And one leaves you always wanting, and one is everlasting satisfaction. That being the flesh always wanting, the spirit giving you the ultimate satisfaction of the Lord and Jesus and all of that, obviously. But another thing too with this, don't think that you have to cut out every single negative person in your life, non-Christian.
Yeah,
that's not where we're going
sure.
with this. I had a friend in high school who I really liked being around, and as I grew closer to my faith, I realized he was going the other way. And because I just noticed this, because he tried to get me to do things that I just didn't want to do as a Christian. I had convictions that I just started straight up telling him, no, I don't want to do that. That's not the kind of life I want to live. And it never got to the point. It can get to a point where if someone keeps doing that and they're pressing you, you need to cut yourself off from that relationship. But sometimes those people are there to also help build your growth. They can be a catalyst that God uses to help you see, not necessarily see the other side of things, but help you grow and understand, in your faith. Because I think there's a benefit for sure to adversity that we face. If we never face any adversity from other influences or other people, we wouldn't grow the way that we would. Now, of course, with that comes a lot of discerning, and there's times to definitely end relationships or move away from evil things that you should not be a part of. But sometimes there is times where God places us in enemy territory, for the lack of a different way to say it. And we are placed there for a reason. And sometimes we're just there to shine a light, and you'll never know the kinds of seeds you might be able to plant in God, and that, how God uses that to bless others. So,
man, that's good. That's good. Last question. What worship song is really speaking to you right now?
I'll tell you one that has, I haven't listened to it in a couple weeks, but I think it was Casting Crowns that sang it originally, but I like Phil Wickham's version a lot. Praise You in the Storm.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was Casting Crowns.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
man.
Casting Crowns is like my entire 91.9 childhood Christian
Bro,
song.
for
My dad
real.
had a CD of it. We'd listen to
Life.
it. Yeah. On the way to kindergarten, like every morning, he always played Casting Crowns. But that song specifically, because just being in a period where I'm in a period of waiting for a lot of things. Firmness in a career, waiting on blessings for a family life and all of that. And as you dive into your faith, you pray these prayers for the things that you desire, and things don't happen. Yep. Sometimes that's just how it works. Yep. And the line in that song where we say amen and it's still raining. So we've prayed our prayer, we've said amen to the Lord, and nothing's changed. It's still raining outside. Things are still dim. Things aren't necessarily the way that we want them to be, but nevertheless, to keep praising God throughout all of it. And that's how especially, not to say that praise in the good times isn't genuine, but praise through the bad times and in the struggles and the worry.
Yeah, it takes something else.
It takes Holy Spirit strength to be able to do that and to get to that point. But that's just something we always have to remember. God's not a God that we should only be praising when he blesses us and gives us good things, because as Christians, we know we're going to go through struggles, big and small. And, he's our rock through all of it. He doesn't just want to hear from us in the good times. He's with us especially in the bad times. He's with us at all times, but he wants to hear our cries and our prayers. But they just don't always get answered right away. And, being in a season of waiting where I'm at now in my life, that has really spoken to me personally. So
that's awesome. I've been locked in on. There's a song called "Pull Me Through" by KXC. I literally have not heard another song by them, but Chloe and I got to go to a church out west when we were on vacation this summer, and they played it, and it was just like right. It's just like I've been listening to it over and over. I don't even think the recording of it is like that. FSI, right? Yeah, we sing it at FSI. I thought so. But I don't even think the recording of it is that great. But it's just, it's one that's really hit home. Really been brought a lot of encouragement. And then I've really been listening to "Sure Been Good" by Elevation recently, and that's one I'd love to introduce at FSI. but it's like the wildest chord progression. It's
Okay.
so hard. I tried to do it, and it's just like absolutely insane. So I'm like, oh, maybe not this one. So it's been, it speaks to what you're talking about of like praising in the midst of everything, like how you know, the ultimate good that's happened in this life is our relationship with Christ, and everything else is blessings.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate blessing, and then everything else on top of that is just blessings. And so, check them out. Those are some good songs to add to your worship playlist.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's episode 1.
Yeah.
Feeling good?
Feeling great.
I have no idea how long this was.
I don't know, but I feel like I could talk here for hours. Man.
I should have started a timer when we started. We're recording.
It's definitely a little over an hour. I think.
Yeah, we're recording,
right
but it's not recording by seconds. I don't know what it's doing.
Oh, I thought the thing at the top was the time.
No, it's not. I don't know. So
right.
This might have been a lot. But yeah, we'd love your feedback. Love for you to fill out some. If you're still here, check out that link in the description, and let us know your questions. Let us know what you've got on your mind. Again, serious things, silly things. We're gonna do something like this every single month, and we look forward to it. And I mean, if we need to, we might do it more than once a month. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't.
That's why.
I
It's
mean,
unscripted.
we're here in the office having these conversations, whether we're recording for you guys or not. So it's like everything
always
from
going on.
Everything from Marvel Rivals to what's happening in our.
Does Jesus have rizz?
Yes, that's the spectrum of this podcast. Does Jesus have rizz? I think that's going to be the title, and I think it's just going to be clickbait. Does Jesus have rizz? Yeah. See if we can make some people frustrated right off the rip.
It doesn't appear to like the end of the show.
But that one student, whoever it was that asked it, like I hope you feel very seen. But yeah, fill out that spiritual survey and let us know what questions you have, and we'll see you guys at FS Middle or FS High.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you guys.
All right, bye.